Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Alison Oliver, and I'm the Research Communications Manager here at DAFNI. We really appreciate the time you've given us today, and we are pleased to introduce Professor Richard Kingston, who's Professor of Urban Planning at the University of Manchester and Director of the university's Digital Futures platform. So please, if you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A throughout, and I will be going through those at the end. And today, Professor Kingston will be talking about the NERC Digital Solutions Hub, which is developing new approaches to connect, discover, and analyse environmental data across the UK research landscape. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes, Professor Kingston, before we make a start. But thank you very much for joining us today. It's great to have you with us. And DAFNI is a very proud project partner, and we look forward to hearing from you about the project in more detail shortly. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes just to allow lots of people, because this has been fantastic for attend. Thank you so much, everyone, for signing up. So we'll give it a couple more minutes. Thank you. Okay, I think Professor Kingston will make a start. And if you could, thank you very much for joining us today. And please, if you just joined us, please add any questions to the Q&A and we'll address those afterwards. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining. So I'm actually presenting from the University of Exeter, not Manchester. I was down here for a NERC Environmental Data Service AI in the Environment meeting yesterday, and ended up staying and travelling back to Manchester later. So what I'm going to do is probably present for about half an hour, and then we'll have some time for any questions at the end. I'm aware of the fact that DAFNI is a partner on this project, so maybe some of you on the call are quite familiar, more familiar than others, around what DSH is. So apologies for those of you who know quite a bit about it, but I suspect there's quite a few on here who have maybe not come across the details of what DSH, the Digital Solutions Hub, as we call it, is. But so it's a 5-year, £8 million investment. Originally, the idea was to build a UKRI national facility, which we're calling the Digital Solutions Hub. And a core focus of this work was really to work with a whole range of stakeholders outside of academia. So public sector, third sector, private sector, industry, and charities and things. And mainly the primary aim is to make NERC's environmental data more accessible and discoverable. As I said, mainly to non-academics, but we actually think there's a lot of academics and researchers who would benefit from having easier access to a lot of this data. And we're following what are called the FAIR principles that NERC are signed up to, along with other research councils, so making data findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable. And for those of you who might not be aware, NERC have these 5 data centres that are listed across the bottom there: Centre for Environmental Data Analysis, UKCH, British Antarctic Survey, Geological Survey, and the British Oceanographic Data Centre. So these have got quite a long history of and expertise in curating and storing a whole range of environmental data. We're told, that up to getting on for 40 petabytes of environmental data. And what NERC were conscious about sort of 5 or 6 years ago, that was, whilst this data is heavily used by academics and researchers, environmental scientists, climate scientists, there's a lot of other people outside of those domains which could benefit from the use of this data. And we said in our proposal that to get real value out of this data, particularly when for non-academics, particularly in public sector organisations, it's when you connect this environmental data with a whole range of other social, economic, health and other environmental data from the likes of DAFNI, the Environment Agency, Met Office, SEPA, Natural Resources Wales, across the whole of the UK, you get even more value out of that. So there are a number of aspects to this. Part of it was about how do we engage users outside of academia to understand what this data is. And what we do know from previous work is if we just built a data portal, something a bit like data.gov.uk, people sort of sit there and stare at the screen and go, well, what on earth can this do? So to help people understand what we might call the art of the possible, we developed a number of use cases and services that we've been doing some user testing over the last few months on that, with looking now to fully launch the DSH. As that first bullet point says, when this started, the idea was it would become a UKRI national facility. At the moment, our big challenge is where does that go? What's happening? We actually don't know at the moment what's happening beyond the 1st of October when the current funding runs out. So we're talking with NERC about at the moment about, and we do have a piece of work that looked at business models and things of how we keep DSH running. So our overall approach, and this is based on, I kind of got a background in developing spatial decision support systems and using GIS to support decision making. So been building these kind of tools for quite some time now. And our overall approach was basically, maybe some of you have seen this, the field of dreams, this idea of build it and they will come. Well, our experience has been, no, that doesn't work. I could have sat here today and we said, well, we spent 4 years building this great thing. You should really come and use it. It can do A, B, and C. And then at the end of this presentation, you'll be asking me, well, we also want to do X, Y, and Z. And at that point, the money's run out and we can't do X, Y, and Z as well. So we spent the first 2 years going around the UK running workshops, face-to-face workshops, very low tech, using paper and pens. We used an organisation, a not-for-profit called Open Data Manchester, to run those workshops. So we got an independent point of view rather than us steering that, to understand the kind of issues and problems potential users had with accessing environmental data and other kinds of data as well. What was interesting amongst that audience was how the vast majority of them had never heard of NERC. When we started explaining things, many of them had heard of organisations like British Geological Survey, mainly because of whenever you move house and you get a ground survey done. And we did remind some of them about, if you remember, Boaty McBoatface a few years ago. I think the ship, NERC's ship, ended up being called the Sir David Attenborough. And some of those people did remember that sort of story that made it onto the national news about people voting for the new name. I think Boaty McBoatface is the name of one of the autonomous submarines. So one of the challenges there and the other thing, at the start, as well as talking with lots of local authorities, we also had discussions. This is way back in COVID. A lot of my time during COVID was having conversations with these kind of national organisations about how, if they were given access to NERC's environmental data, how might that help them in the kind of decisions and policy making that they undertake. Some of these are quite out of date now. We don't have Public Health England. It's now the UK Health Security Agency, but you'll see organisations on there that you're kind of fairly familiar with. What came out of all of that work doing with Open Data Manchester was this sort of user journey, where people generally would define the problem that they're trying to tackle. They would spend a lot of time getting data, finding data, getting that, wrangling that. Eventually then they'd come on to doing some analysis on that data, and then they'd probably have to showcase that data, present that either to local communities, if it's say for using environmental data support where they're going to build housing or siting particular facilities. So showcasing that data either to the public, policymakers, local politicians and things, and then they go through a process to manage that data. So we could put all the 100+ users that came to our workshops somewhere along this data journey. And we then developed a set of user personas where we could place different types of users within organisations. This is all written up into user engagement reports, and there is a journal article imminent. We've just sent back, we've had the proofs all done, so that'll be coming out in the next few months, hopefully, that explains a really deep dive into this whole process and what we found. And what Open Data Manchester came up with is a set of 6 archetypes. we could put all of those users along that data journey. We get different types of users, what we call the analyst, the investigator, the author, the data specialist, the data leader, and the data steward. And yeah, this is the journal article I've just referred to. It's coming out in the Journal of Data, Information and Management, hopefully later this year, having had the revisions now accepted. But we also think there is another persona, researchers, people like yourselves, who would actually, who may be not familiar with NERC data, but could use a lot of NERC's data if it was fairer, if it was very much more findable than it has been. We're also building on previous work. So if you've never come across this before, we first built this in 2015. It's called Climate Just, and it looks at climate change across England, Scotland, and well, England, Wales. There is data for Scotland as well, but recent updates were only England and Wales. To understand climate change from a social vulnerability perspective. So what you're looking at here, it's a bit like an index of multiple deprivation, but including UK CP18 climate data in there. You can zoom into different areas, and there's several hundred layers of data in here. So it's combining the climate risk data along with characteristics about the underlying population. And you can zoom into, there's APIs in this that you can connect the data and pull it out into your own software and services. Now, one of the challenges when you've got so much environmental data, and we know that there's been a rise over the past decade or so of open data, lots of open data portals. But one of the challenges that came out of the user research was, how do you find data sets you need if you're not exactly sure what you are looking for? A lot of users, they might want climate data, but they're not necessarily familiar with the terms around UK CP18 climate scenario data. They wouldn't understand the language in which that data's presented and the way it's catalogued. And NERC already have something called the Data Catalogue Service, where you can search for the data that NERC hold across their 5 data centres. It works pretty well. But it's based on keyword searches, and they have been looking at how we can improve this. And part of what DSH has done is to build new approaches, particularly using AI and large language models to search for the data. I always kind of think I was saying to someone yesterday at the meeting, I've been down here at Exeter, but when we put our proposal in 2019-20, we didn't mention AI, and we certainly didn't mention large language models. So this has kind of come out of pretty rapid sort of the explosion of AI, particularly in the context of large language models, where we've been able to start to think about how can we use an LLM to search for data. So at the moment, if you use a keyword search, you ask questions. Remember, these are the kind of questions that our non-academic users will want to know. Where will be the hottest place in the UK in 2030? Not surprisingly, no results, even though there is data across the NERC's Environmental Data Service that could help answer this kind of question. So we thought, well, how can we use a large language model? Is there a way in which we could train that, fine-tune it somehow? So that when you ask it that kind of question, it's returning. So we developed this about 3 years ago. When you ask that same question, it's then giving you lists of data sets that can help you answer that question. So that data already sits in the catalogue. It's just we built an interface to the catalogue which allows you to ask these natural language questions, and then it's showing you there UK CP local projections at 2.2 kilometre resolution, and other data sets there are listed, so that we're actually getting using natural language processing to actually extract the data sets from the catalogue. Sorry, I jumped ahead once. What we're using here, though, and one of the challenges with our users was around how do you trust the responses if you're using a large language model. So what we've done here is we've used something called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what we've done is taken the metadata of the 40 petabytes of data, put the metadata and all the associated documents that NERC hold in their Environmental Data Service, put those into a database. And then when you ask it this question, the responses it's giving you is coming from the RAG database and model, not, if you just went on to say ChatGPT or any other kind of large language model that you find online, where it's searching the whole internet, the whole sort of corpus of knowledge that sits in there. This is constraining that within, so the results it's returning and the information it's giving you using RAG is coming out of the metadata. So we know that we can then trust what it's telling us. We then also started thinking, well, can we start asking more complex questions, not just searching for the data itself? Let me just stop this a moment. So we experimented with different tools. We've used Claude here, and what we asked Claude to do is to connect to the database, and what we've asked it here is, can you identify where all the elderly people vulnerable to climate change live in the UK? And as we run this, what we start to see is it's querying the tables in our database. And the things here, it's querying the data from the Climate Just tool. It's found some tables around what's called the Social Flood Vulnerability Index. And eventually, as we scroll down through here, as it's running, it starts to identify, I remember asked about the elderly vulnerable population. And what it eventually finds are some tables. So here we've got, let me just try and stop that again. Here we can see single pensioner households, all pensioner households. So it's identified just by asking vulnerable elderly people. We didn't even use the word pensioner, but it's pulling using the knowledge of the large language model, but sort of constrained by the RAG model of pulling data, the data schemas and the metadata. It's identified, it thinks that single pensioner households, we do know, are more vulnerable than say a cohabiting set of pensioners, that they'd be more vulnerable. And what it eventually does, maybe I'll jump this forward a little bit, it's going through here, we can see particular what are called MSOAs, middle super output areas, which have a high proportion of single pensioner households living in those areas, and all also come out as having a high socio flood vulnerability index. And there are other questions we could ask this. I'm doing something the other day for data analysts in the Liverpool City region, so I asked it specific questions. You know, can you tell me where in Merseyside elderly vulnerable people to climate change live? And what it's doing here, we asked this for the whole of the UK, sorry, England. It's picked out there the 5 middle super output areas, their census units, that have the highest percentage of single pensioner households that are vulnerable to climate change. So we're able to use this to ask kind of natural language questions of the data, and then it's giving responses. And the next step we're trying to get to is, can we apply this approach but actually get some geospatial outputs from this? We've also been thinking, how do you actually search for data? We need 2 versions. We've got a version that is just a standard, let me just start this, a standard sort of search catalog. This is built on something called Esri Enterprise, where you can just do a norm as the standard kind of keyword search. The difference between what we've built over what the current data service catalog does is that what users wanted was, they didn't want just the data and then to download the data and then have to spend 80% of their time wrangling data, getting it into the right format into the software. They wanted services. So when you search for data sets, they wanted that data already to be pre-processed and ready to integrate into software. And the vast majority of NERC's data is spatial, it can be mapped. So we use what's called Esri Enterprise software stack that sits on top of the catalog. So when you search things, you can immediately click on things and it will generate the map. So the user is not having to, as I said earlier, spend 80% of the time wrangling data and then 20% of their time actually doing something useful with it. This was an early version. We constrained it just to data in Manchester for disk-based reasons, really, but now the full catalogue covers the whole of the UK. And you can click through here. So although this was built on proprietary software, the data itself is fully open. And one of the things from the user research was saying, a lot of users said they just don't have access to the software, they don't have the right kind of a laptop or a PC that's powerful enough to do the kind of work they want to do. All of this sits in Azure. So we sort of serve that data out, and you can drill down right down into the metadata. Somewhere down here on the right, I think eventually it comes to, you can find the actual data endpoint. So all of this, there's an API, so you can actually pull the data into your own software as well if you don't want to use the actual catalog. You just use it to search. And here we can click on and access and find metadata. I want this runs for quite a while. I'm not going to go, here we can see, yeah, you can actually get to the source of the data. I won't leave this running. I can share the slides afterwards with everyone, so you can watch this. And actually, there will be a link at the end where you can go onto the hub and search through the kind of data we've got. But I think the key thing is it's built on a piece of proprietary software, Esri Enterprise, but the data itself, every single piece of data in DSH is fully open, so it makes it findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Right, one of the other services we've built is something called the UPRN service. If you remember at the start, I said that we were going to integrate health data. And one of the challenges with health data, particularly, obviously, if it's data about individuals, we can't put that into DSH. It needs to go into a trusted research environment. We do have aggregated health data, kind of, if it's area-based health data at MSOA or ward level, that's fine. But we have a lot of users working in the health sector, whether that's in epidemiology, if it's in medical schools, in research. We've been working with UKHSA, UK Health Security Agency, the UK Biobank. The idea of this UPRN service, a unique property reference number, these are these points on the map. They're more accurate than a postcode. And what we've done is built this service using these unique property reference numbers, or UPRNs, and then attaching to those UPRNs a whole range of environmental indicators. And what a user can do is come onto here, zoom into a particular part of the UK, select an area. It will then highlight all of those UPRNs. And what in this case here, what I've got an example of is noise pollution overlaid on the UPRNs. And then you can extract a subset of these UPRNs, attach to that a whole set of environmental indicators, in this case, noise data. You can then download that, download that data set as a CSV file. Then if you're an analyst in UKHSA or a public health official in a local authority somewhere, you can extract this data and then put that into your very secure, trusted research environment. And what we do know is now that NHS and other health providers have attached UPRNs to all of our health records. So you can then use that UPRN as the unique link to connect this NERC environmental data and other environmental data from DEFRA, Met Office, whoever really, connect that inside your trusted research environment to the health records. And we've just published a paper recently on looking at the environmental determinants of cancer, and working with the Christie Cancer Research Centre in Manchester that has national data on cancer patients. And in their trusted research environment, they're now able to link this environmental data to their patient records and start to understand if there are any spatial patterns. This is gridded data for nitrogen dioxide, and again you can extract that and link it to the UPRNs. Here we've got an early version of the proof of concept. So here is the kind of user interface. You zoom into an area, it shows the UPRNs, and then you can go through here and pick and mix the kind of data that you might want to attach. We've got Met Office data in there, DEFRA data, Centre for Ecology and Hydrology data, and you link those UPRNs, and then you can put it in a trusted research environment. We've got other examples of local authorities saying, well, this will be really useful to say, show me all the UPRNs within 100 metres of the coastline that might be affected by sea level rise or a tidal surge, and they could then identify the exact properties. This isn't just residential as well. It can also it also picks up commercial buildings and things like a changing room in a sports field or something like that. It's not just about residential properties. We're also working with Newcastle University, have a real-time data flow. So we're picking up real-time data endpoints. Some of these are, the blue ones are water level gauges in rivers from the Environment Agency. We've got Met Office wind speed data, and we've got water level data from boreholes from BGS. There is a small subset of data, you can't quite see it, but it coming from Newcastle City Council, which is traffic counts. But the idea here is that we have that workflow. So as more and more real-time data comes into the data centres and other organisations, we have a way of integrating that into the hub. And a kind of use case on this is things like if air pollution reaches a critical level in a city, the hospital knows that patients start arriving in A&E within 36 hours with respiratory illness, and they can then think about how they might roster the right kind of staff in A&E to deal with that influx of patients. Then we thought, well, how can we start pulling all of this together and providing a map interface to search for that data? And again, this is one of the proof of concepts that we're now scaling up to the whole of the UK. What we're asking here is, can you show me all the UPRNs, those unique property reference numbers, where PM 2.5 is greater than 2.8? And this is using LangChain to convert the natural language into the GIS commands in the back end. What this is essentially doing is what I'd call a point in polygon SQL query. So identify all the points in a particular polygon that match this particular query. In this case, where PM 2.5 is greater than 2.8. What you're seeing here, though, is a set of UPRNs that match that criteria, but they're on grid squares. We've obviously constrained this to the Greater Manchester boundary in this example. But a lot of the environmental data, i.e. PM 2.5 in this example now, nitrogen dioxide, is gridded data. So a lot of the same values get assigned to the UPRNs. But another example, a bit like the coastline one I just referred to, would be, say, show me all the UPRNs in flood zone 2 or flood zone 3, or show me all the UPRNs within 100 meters of a site of special scientific interest. So you get the idea from this. It's sort of taking that natural language approach and then using the geospatial backend to actually then identify areas that meet that criteria. We've been doing this is partly why I'm down at Exeter at the moment. We were demonstrating something yesterday where we're using AI approaches to convert the natural language into an interactive map. So one of those examples is, can you identify areas suitable for housing that are not in areas where there are environmental constraints, and it generates the map on the fly. One of those as well is around one of the use cases, and you can access this. This is fully open. Is what we call the Where to Build app. So this is sort of demonstrating the art of the possible. When you integrate NERC's data with lots of other economic, social, other environmental data, can that help, say, for example, in this case, identify locations for where you build the 1.5 million homes that the government supposedly think that they can do over this parliament. I think it's a bit of a challenge. So we built this service on top of the underlying data. And what this allows you to do is, if you're a local authority or a developer, you can draw a polygon on the map, this area in the middle. We've set a buffer around that of 0.5 kilometre, and then it will run an analysis for that. So normally what you'd have to do is you'd be turning lots of layers on and off in the GIS software. This is all online. It allows you to run that analysis and it produces a report. So the purple, the sort of bright pink areas are where there is an intersection between that site and within that buffer with a set of environmental constraints. So we've been doing some work recently here, looking at the 12 locations of the government's idea for new towns. And what we see here, we're using that same tool. We've got concentric circles because at the moment we don't know the exact location of the new towns. They're just given place names. So we kind of pinpointed that area, but then drawn circular buffers around that. Just sort of a bit of a proof of concept of how could this work. And what we're seeing here, where you get green areas, that is high quality agricultural land. The red areas are areas that are already densely populated. So not surprisingly, we see there Victoria North and Leeds South Bank and the one in Plymouth that are already in very central areas. The blue areas, not surprisingly, are flood risk zones. So the one that really stands out there is Thames Mead Riverside. The proposal there to build between 10 and 40,000 residential units for this new town, essentially in flood zone 2. So maybe needs a bit of a rethink from the government there, but it gives you an idea here of how quickly you can run that sort of analysis to get an idea of what's going on at a kind of regional level. And we've been talking to MHCLG about maybe thinking a bit more clearly about including environmental data in this. Here are links to the different services. We have been doing user testing recently. So we've got the UPRN service, the catalogue service. We've got two versions of the catalogue, a traditional keyword search, but also an AI, natural language search. The climate just tool has been there for many years now, but that was revised. We've got the housing use case there. And we also got one around environment and health as well, looking at sort of air pollution, things like that, and linking environment and health data together. As I said, you're probably not going to be able to write all these down now, but the slides will be shared afterwards, so you'll be able to click on those. And obviously all of this information is available through our main website as well. So I will stop there, Alison, and I'll leave that slide up, and then people can kind of digest that, and I can always jump back if people have got questions. And in the meantime, I will take a drink of water.
Thanks very much, Professor Kingston, for a fantastic presentation. Please do send any questions to the Q&A. We already have some coming in. So first question, Richard, are you happy to kick off Q&A?
Yeah.
Do properties fall into different environmental zones, e.g. noise levels, PM2.5, etc., get the environment attributes for multiple environment datasets during export?
Yes, so you can pick and mix what you want. So it's for the user to decide. You might be your task might be just to look at noise pollution. So all you get is tick the box. You zoom into your area, you select the locations, and then you say, I just want noise data. Equally, if you want noise data and you want air pollution data, it's for the user to decide what they want. So I guess the answer is yes.
Okay, thanks very much. That's the first question for now. Please do send in any further questions. You did cover everything in such wonderful detail. You have to admit, Richard. So, but we'll give it another couple of minutes or so to see if anyone has any further questions.
You mean the UPRNs are a kind of product that's very heavily used in local government. So it's a I'm finding in research context, a lot of people are like, oh, I've never heard of these UPRNs, but they are used, across, whether it's housing, social care, education.
No, I thought that was fascinating how you had access to all that data as well, because that's something I've been certainly writing about recently, that data sharing can be an issue as well. But you seem to really got across that very well. We do have another question. What processes do you use to clean raw data? What metrics do you use to make sure the clean data is then high quality?
So we don't do that, because thankfully we've got the Environmental Data Service that's been around for many years, many decades. They curate the data. So those 5 data centers, that's their job to make sure that the data is clean, has good metadata. So it's those. If you're funded by NERC at the end of your project, and you've generated new data, you have to submit that data to the relevant data center, and you work with the data center to make sure that the data meets certain standards. Now that is variable. There's some excellent metadata and some brilliant stuff in there. There are some others maybe that are not can be vague at times, but that's not been our task to do the data cleaning. We're here to sort of oil the wheels and make it easier for non-specialists to access the data.
Okay, thanks, Professor Kingston. Next question: how accurate LLMs converting language to script that ArcGIS code to visualize the output?
The tests and experiments we've done, very good. I would say. I probably needed my one of my software engineers on the call really, but he's on a train back to Manchester, having been at the same thing as me yesterday. But he would have been able to. I mean, you'd be more than happy to get in touch with him. He's called Vasilis, so you'll find his details. He will know in far more detail than me how well that's been performing. But certainly, when we've done the sort of testing it out and sort of ground truthing that, how does that compare with a traditional way of doing that in a piece of GIS software? It's pretty good, because it's essentially doing yeah, it's just like I said, it's doing a pointing polygon SQL process, the same as what you would do in the GIS software, but it means someone without GIS or spatial analysis expertise can do that.
Thank you. Next question. Would you consider use or create a model context protocol? The person's very kindly put a link in to the chat server for the Digital Solutions Hub.
We've worked on another, doing exactly that. We worked on a project called Talk Data to Me. So if you look up ESRC Talk Data to Me, it was funded. It was a future data services pilot project where we used an MCP server to basically query the NERC data in conjunction with ESRC, what's called Consumer Data Research Centre data, now called the Geographic Data Service as part of Smart Data Research UK. There's lots of acronyms here. So yes, we've done it on this other project. We've not applied that to DSH directly though.
Thank you. Next question. This is so interesting and such a powerful tool. Do you expect pushback from developers or similar parties who may not be happy about more people being able to more easily see data that can show if where they are going to build or have built has poor markers?
I'm just reading that one. So I guess, yeah, I mean, there are some commercial companies out there that make lots of money from doing this kind of thing. And we're kind of coming along with something that's freely accessible. We certainly getting lots of interest from regional authority, city mayors like the Greater London Authority, Greater Manchester Combined Authority, the Liverpool City Region, the West Midlands, who think this is fantastic and it's giving them easier access to data. What's been interesting in this whole process, it's really hard to talk to those kind of people. They do not want to come and talk to us. They don't want to talk about the problems they have with accessing and using data. But I guess, yeah, I think if, I mean, I did say at the start, a challenge we've got at the moment is what happens on the 1st of October if we don't get NERC funding. We do have a piece of work that was done by the Connected Places Catapult on business models and how much would people, organisations be willing to pay for this kind of thing. Equally, though, those developers could be our sort of customers, and use DSH to support their proposals.
Thank you. Next question. Are there any problems you've encountered adding data from Scotland to data from England and Wales?
Yeah, so on Climate Just, the reason there was a gap in Scotland wasn't to do with the data itself. It was the fact that it was more politics at the time. As Mike will know, if you're trying to come up with a single like social flood vulnerability index, when you've got different census variables in Scotland as opposed to England, Wales, that does throw up problems. There are ways around that. But the DSH itself, if you forget about the Climate Just tool, but actually things like the housing one, it does work in Scotland as well, and we've got data, Scottish data in there.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Where does non-environmental data come from, e.g. UPRNs? Do you have infrastructure data, or perhaps you use OpenStreetMaps? Yeah,
so the UPRNs are actually a product produced by Ordnance Survey. So it's an open data product, but all it is just an XY coordinate, a lat-long coordinate, and then the unique property reference number. It's about an 8 or 10 digit number that's unique to that point. What we have done is then attach environmental variables to those millions of UPRNs across the UK. Office for National Statistics, ONS, also have a version of the UPRN where they've attached some census, some socio-economic data, things like index of multiple deprivation, things like that. Infrastructure data, yes, we do. If you go on the housing application, there is infrastructure data on there around national grid. We've got renewable energy networks. In terms of OpenStreetMap, the user can choose what the base map is. So you tend to find OpenStreetMap's pretty popular in the research community. In local government, they can't go anywhere near it. They have to use the Ordnance Survey base maps for legal reasons. But the idea as well is that it may be that you've got some data on your own network, on your own machine. There are ways in which you can add that in to DSH and you keep that locally. It doesn't come to us, but if you've maybe got a data set you don't want to share with anyone or it's not publicly accessible, there are ways in which the hub allows you to overlay that data and include it in the analysis you might be undertaking that's your own data. So you might be a local authority that's got some data or a researcher that you don't want to share, and you can connect that.
Okay, thank you. Next question, is there any link to National Data Library work at all?
If you ask me that question in about a week's time, I'll give you an answer, because I've got a meeting with them next Wednesday morning. Okay. They seem to have disappeared and went very quiet, and they now seem to have come back outside again. I don't know what's been going on with them, but we've got a meeting with them next week to talk about how we can link some of things together.
Okay, stay tuned for that one. Okay. Thank you all so much for sending so many questions. Do we have any further questions before we close the webinar? Just give everyone a minute for one last questions. And Richard, time to have a drink. Oh, no. And yes, thank you for another question. Can non-specialists access where to build, or is it only available as a single case study? Oh, sorry, Richard, you're muted.
Yes, sorry. I thought I'd unmute. I was coughing, so I thought I'd turn the microphone. Anyway, the Where to Build app is fully open, so anyone can access that on the link that was on the previous slide. Here, as I said, we'll share that. The idea of the Where to Build app is as a demonstrating the art of the possible, because as I said, a lot of users kind of just look at a data portal and go, what on earth do I do with this? It's to sort of illustrate, although whilst it's got a lot of utility for people who are interested in where to build new towns and other things. I had a conversation with people in Department for DCM, Department for Culture, Media and Sport recently, and said, forget it's about where to build. What about if we called it where to protect? And if you draw a polygon around Tewkesbury Cathedral, it runs an environmental analysis, of climate risks on a historic site like Tewkesbury Cathedral or Stonehenge. So it does have wider application. It could be, that you're trying to identify a location for a big data center, and there's slightly different criteria. Is it in an area where there's a good water supply? Is it near a high voltage cable? Is it not in a flood zone? So I think it has wide application. If you just think, well, it's not just about where to build houses. It could be where to build the next supermarket or the next B&Q warehouse or something.
Thank you. Next question, how easy is it to link to SDR UK data?
It will be getting very easy because we're collaborating with SDR UK on how DSH can connect with what's called Imago, one of their projects. And we do, as I said earlier, we've had a pilot project with Alex Singleton at Liverpool on smart data. Future data services, excuse me. So yeah, we're in conversation with the SRC and the teams on various projects. I think that the fact that every single data set in there has an open data, it's got an API, so you can get to the data endpoint. We can start to join things together.
Okay. And this might be the last question. Can noise level be downloaded before the launch of this tool in October, and if so, where?
Yep, so you go onto the UPRN service and you can just grab the data from there. The noise data is not NERC data, actually. It is that is DEFRA data. So you could go onto DEFRA's web portal and get that data as well.
Hey. Hey. Well, if there are no further questions, I think we'll bring the webinar today to a close. Thank you so much to Professor Kingston for joining us today. That was a fantastic, as to quote one of our attendees, that was a fantastic webinar, very insightful. And I think on behalf of everybody, we all hope that you get your continued funding this autumn, fingers crossed. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. You'll be able to view Professor Kingston's webinar on our website. I will upload it as soon as possible, and along with any links as well that Professor Kingston has mentioned as well. And all the slides will also be going up on the website as well. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Oh, do we have time for one last question? Oh, no, so thank you very much. Beg your pardon, I just have to go with the flow and see what comes up. But thanks very much for everyone for joining us today. And yes, best of luck to Professor Kingston in his future endeavours with what is clearly a fantastic project. And definitely an extremely proud partner for it. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
What I'll do